I always love watching behind the scenes of stuff. Like, for example, when Black Ops 6 was releasing, I was eating up watching the behind the scenes and then making that music, or like seeing concept art for various games. Like, I remember Tears of the Kingdom came in the special edition. It had like a art book. I want to say it was Tears of the Kingdom, and it had like a bunch of concept art inside of it. And it's really cool seeing stuff like that, especially in a game as beautiful and as art direction driven as Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And then obviously when it comes to the worlds of the video games, that just ties into Immersion from before. It's just really cool. Not only are racing games getting really good at just making you feel like you're literally seeing something in real life with how many pixels are on the screen, how much detail goes into it, but even going back into older games, right? Like, I'm making a series on Crash Twinsanity at the moment, and it still blew my mind just, standing on the top of the one hill and overlooking everything, and seeing all the trees and the oceans and just the sounds of the birds and the wind and everything, and that game's from 2004. And relatively speaking, Crash Twinsanity has always been known to be a bit of an unpolished game, just had some developmental trouble. Yet, it's still such a beautiful game to look at. You feel so immersed in that world. So I have a huge respect, fondness, and love for seeing what goes into building a world in a video game and just existing in that world. And that point actually backpedals into another point that I wanted to bring up, so we can just go ahead and mention it now. Is just the sheer timelessness of video games. Once again, Crash Twinsanity released in 2004, and despite the fact that it wasn't even the most graphically impressive game of the day if you're talking about just sheer realism and graphics, the art direction of the game was so good that, 21 years later, absolutely timeless. 21 years later, brother. How old am I? I am literally fossilizing. Anyway, video games are literally timeless. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a new video game, unless it's a live service game in which its days are numbered, unfortunately, and that's a whole other conversation that could be made into like 5 videos on its own. I'd have some opinions going both ways in that one, but for other video games that will be able to exist for years and generations to come, they're absolutely timeless. And, for example, go back and look at the Super Nintendo. Those games, especially with how prevalent and popular even the, like the pixel art style is nowadays, games from the NES and the Super Nintendo, you look at those games, and something like Super Mario World realistically could have released today just because that art style is timeless. And you look at a game like Donkey Kong Country, which was trying to be realistic while still having an art direction and an art style, still is ridiculously impressive. Like, I look at that game and the graphics still impress me, not just because of the hardware it's running on and considering that hardware and the technical leaps they had to make in order to make those kind of graphics be possible on that hardware, but also just because the game just genuinely looks good, regardless of graphics or age or hardware. It's a good looking game. It looks fantastic.